The biggest challenge we face in our own evolutionary process is healing from soul loss. It is one of the most important things to know during a spiritual awakening journey. So today I'm going to be talking all about trauma and its biggest effect, which is soul loss. 90% of the time that the body-mind has incurred a traumatic event, it fragments into the state of what shamans call soul loss. We experience soul loss when an aspect of the self has fractured off due to a traumatic event and is now in a separate state that is divided from the totality. You could think of this aspect of the self that is stuck in a state of soul loss as an ongoing mental loop. It's looping not only through the mental body, but through our whole entire nervous system. So it can't move forward because it's not connected into our totality. So it takes place as a division within not only our body, mind, but within our physiology, our energy field, our spirit, our soul, all scales that we exist on. There creates a fragmentation. I personally like to illustrate soul loss as that one Superman movie from the 80s, I believe, where there's just this piece of mirror that's floating through outer space. And not that many people really know what I'm referring to. So, however, a more well-known illustration would be such like a bodyguard that would take one for the team or absorb the shock to protect a figure that they're protecting. And so in soul loss, it acts sort of in the same mechanism to where a piece of the network absorbs the shock of the trauma. And the absorption of that shock fragments it off from its totality. So you could look at soul loss as the division that occurs if a glass cup were to fall on the floor but not fully shatter. So the symptoms of this fragmentation that we see take place has such a broad range. It can range anywhere from having rage problems and having absolute total numbness, and then everything in between that spectrum. So soul loss can take the form as having unexplainable deep grief, or having unknown and chronic anxiety issues, deep-seated paranoia, a sense of abandonment deep within the subconscious, and any type of spiritual neurosis you could possibly imagine. All of these different manifestations are symptoms of a systemic issue within the body-mind-spirit complex. So it's really important to make the differentiation between multidimensionality and fragmentation. Multidimensionality is our higher nature. So multidimensionality can look very similar to fragmentation because multidimensionality inherently implies that there is more than one unit going on within the same complex. And there is. Only with multidimensionality, it's not necessarily birthed from trauma. Multidimensionality is our higher essence. It's our connection with the higher aspects of our own energy field. And ultimately, it's a unique facet and unique dimension that is expressing the totality of our being, which is vast, endless, and broad. So even though one can absolutely argue that multidimensionality itself is due to fragmentation and trauma, and they would totally be right, it's still not coming from the same level of trauma as fragmentation is coming from. Fragmentation or soul loss is coming from a state of injury. And because it's coming from an injured state, there's division within that network, creating chaos. The opposite of chaos is coherency. Coherency is when there is unity and order within a network. Chaos, or in this case fragmentation, is therefore the opposite of that, where it is divided and separate. So you can look at it kind of like the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. It's divided and cannot contribute to the totality or the whole. So we become literally less of ourselves, which is why it's called soul loss. These aspects that are stuck in a state of soul loss have their own point of attraction that is also contributing to our energy field. Soul loss has many implications. We always look at the world through whatever context we best know. So if we best know the context of, let's say, a dietitian, we will look at things through the lens of nutrition. If we have the context of an anthropologist, we will look at the context of the world through that anthropological lens. If we look at the world through an academic perspective, or if we look at the world through a third dimensional perspective, or if we look at the world through even a medical perspective. However, our context is only as good as our ability to understand all of our reality. And with all contexts already taken into consideration, the context that this external reality and internal reality in this third dimension best and most accurately is reflected through is from the shamanic perspective of soul loss. So it's actually soul loss that's taking place in the world, and it has all these different manifestations and all these different symptoms that look like one thing, or they look like they need to be addressed this way and that way, and they're all just seriously different variations of soul loss. So I mentioned earlier about how 90% of the time when we experience a traumatic event, we go into the state of soul loss. How that occurs is through the state of shock. Shock is what fragments and divides. Shock is so crucial to all of this that we may not even know how much shock we carry within our energy field. What shock does is create a lot of frozenness. It creates frozen willpower. It creates an ability to not move forward. Or if we are able to function and move forward with severe soul loss, it comes with a very survivalist energy. So it's come where we had to push parts of ourselves forward that do know how to survive and do know how to manage without those other aspects of the energy field that were contributing and that were a part of the totality. So in one form or another, we become the version of ourselves that can best survive. Creating wholeness within the body, mind, spirit complex is so important that the word holy that we know of from a religious context actually was derived from a deep subconscious yearning for wholeness. And that's how important wholeness is, being holy to this experience and to ourselves. So the esoteric meaning of holy is to become whole, the wholeness that we experience through a healing journey. There are powerful means that we can implement in order to start integrating soul loss. One of them is through toning. So let me know in the comments if you'd like me to make a video on toning, and I will explain this protocol in depth. So we know that soul loss occurs from trauma. What defines a trauma then? I define a trauma as anything that has exceeded the nervous system's capacity to process it. This means literally anything that was too overwhelming for the body, mind, spirit complex to process fully. That means a being's threshold for how much they can handle within an event before it exceeds the capacity of their nervous system is subjective and personal to each person. There are some events that will be objectively traumatic, and then there are some that will be perceptionally traumatic, and that will impact one person differently than it will another. One person might not be impacted at all by the same event that will drastically have traumatized another person. So soul loss doesn't come only from things that are blatantly traumatic, although that is usually what's taking place most of the time. These aspects of ourself that are stuck in a state of soul loss have their own gifts. They have their own intuitive abilities. They have their own creative life force. They have their own essence. And so when we reintegrate these aspects into our totality, what we're really doing is becoming multidimensional. We're becoming more of our higher self. We're being able to embody higher bandwidths of frequency. The reason why soul loss and becoming trauma informed is so vital to spiritual awakening is because we continue to become magnetized back to dimensions where we have stuck aspects of ourselves that are in a separate soul loss state. We can't just ascend or heal or evolve without reclaiming these aspects of ourselves that have dropped off lifetime after lifetime in this dimension. They call us back. They're like a homing beacon. That would almost be like trying to cut aspects of ourselves off in order to be light enough to float to heaven, which it doesn't work that way. You can only go so far until you would need to be called back into healing and to an experience that would allow you to reach communion with those aspects that are stuck in a state of soul loss. Because once again, they're a part of your whole totality. So when it comes to our own spiritual evolution, the lower you go is the higher you can go. Another way of saying this is the depths equal the heights. Whatever remains in a state of soul loss contributes to the density that magnetizes us to this reality. So it will pull us back here until union or wholeness has been created within the body-mind network. What this also means is that when we start integrating our soul loss, we're able to experience more of the now moment. We're able to be more present. Because when we're not able to be present, that's actually trauma from us being pulled into the past. When we're able to cultivate presence, we're also not in anxiety or fear of the future so much. But the more esoteric meaning of being in the now moment means we're actually able to access the entire quantum field, because the whole quantum field exists in the present now moment. It doesn't exist in a concept in our mind. It doesn't exist in the past or some visionary thing in outer space. The quantum field is only accessible in the now and in the present moment. When you're able to be fully in the present moment and in this now, you're able to access the quantum field. What that means is you're able to shift timelines. You're able to connect with your higher self. You're able to channel. You're able to have divine guidance. All of the things that people want that are the fruits of a spiritual awakening are accessed in the now moment when integration is occurring. You don't even need to be fully integrated. We don't need to look at this as like we have to seal all of the pieces of our fractured self back together to make it look like there wasn't a mark. You just show up in spirit as a smiling mosaic, a happy Frankenstein. You don't need to make it look like there was never a scar, there was any stitches. You don't have to absolutely go back and heal and reclaim every single state of soul loss that has ever occurred. You just need to become trauma informed, do the best you can, be dedicated towards higher consciousness, broadening our awareness, and always do the best we can at whatever level that we're operating from to heal and to integrate. Life is very wise. Life will show you what you need to heal and what you need to integrate, and in no uncertain terms. So life is going to help us get in contact with these aspects, whether we want it to or not, or whether we know we're on a healing journey or not. It's just better if we do know we're on one. I hope this has helped you retrieve parts of your floating mirrors in outer space. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for higher dimensional guidance through spiritual awakenings. See you next time.